Hi, this is Shubham Tiwari, and I welcome you to Industry Talk, show brought to you by Wonderpublish magazine, where we try to bring to you the best of the insights and the voices from publishing, education, and education technology industries. Today's guest, Mr. Atul Bengeri, has over 22 years of experience in digital transformation on various industry verticals, and right now he's the director of strategy and business transformation on digital education healthcare verticals at AcumenToday Private Limited. Welcome, Mr. Atul Bengeri, to Wonderpublish magazine.
Thank you so much, Shubham, and it's a pleasure to be part of this talk.
Great, sir. So as I just told our audience that you have over 22 years of experience from which you draw upon, uh, how do you see the new education policy, let's say, in line with digital transformation?
Okay, well, digital transformation is the way of life today. And the last year has taught us, or rather brought the focus more towards what digital transformation can bring to the table, not just for the businesses, not just for the industry, but for education segment as well.
Correct.
What better way to connect? What better way to keep learning? What better way to be in line with what is needed for the future? And it's going to be digital whatsoever you may want to think about.
Right.
Digital is the way forward. And we have to embrace the technology. We have to be part of the technology to be in line with what is in store for the future. And education is all about providing the insights to create the impact that is needed by the present learners to be successful future individuals. And if they lose out on the digital aspect of it, it would be a thing of taking them 2 steps back.
Correct.
So digital literacy is one of the most important aspects of our education system today, and it's going to remain so.
Okay. And you're an entrepreneur now, and we can see that on your T-shirt as well, like AcumenToday. So
Yeah.
please tell us about AcumenToday, your role there, and what you're planning to do.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. While I was with the industry earlier,
Yeah.
have worked on smart education, digital education, e-learning, and a whole lot of stuff that goes into bringing in new usage models through technology interventions in the education segment. And that's when I realized that there is a huge gap, not just in terms of technology adoption, but in terms of the basic understanding of the subject, the topic, the concept at
Okay.
a foundational level. And that manifests going forward into the higher education, because unless and until my fundamentals are not strong, I will not be able to apply it going forward. And that would lead to a lot of complications of not being employable and
Correct.
not having the right skills, not having the right knowledge to
Yeah.
be able to apply and be successful in your career, in your profession, whether as an employee or as an entrepreneur. Right. So having seen that gap, AcumenToday was formed basically to focus on addressing this gap of understanding the concepts, understanding the topic, understanding the subjects, and basically looking at how the understanding can be applied for problem solving.
Okay.
When we say problem solving, it's all about learning to think and thinking to learn. So thinking and learning go hand in hand, and that's exactly what AcumenToday is focusing on in a physical digital approach, not completely digital as well.
Okay.
Because at the foundational level, it's very important that the look and feel, the physical touch, the
Yeah.
physical experience should not be completely eliminated.
Correct.
So that's where AcumenToday is working on, basically in line with the national education policy, which we can talk about it later.
Okay. And you're also planning to enter, the school education as well. You spoke about
Yes.
the higher education. So can you tell us about, on school front, what AcumenToday is doing?
Yeah. So our major focus is from pre-primary to grade 10.
Okay.
And that's across all the boards. the CBSE, the ICSE, state boards, and even IB.
Okay.
And when we say that we are focusing on the conceptual learning side of it, it is mainly focusing on the concepts of science, math, and English as a language, which is delivered through our methodology called SIMECOR.
Okay.
SIMECOR is an acronym, mainly talking about the learning side of the education.
Right.
It is simplified learning, meaningful learning, conceptual learning, and reinforced learning.
Okay.
So the first two alphabets of each of this is forming our acronym called SIMECOR methodology.
SIMECOR. Okay.
That's the methodology we use for grade 1 to grade 10.
All right.
And for the pre-primary, which includes the nursery, playgroup, junior KG, and senior KG, we have a methodology called 3I, which is talking about an integrated, interconnected, and interrelated learning experience for the children at that age.
Okay. Wonderful. And since you spoke about the new education policy, I mean, there is a lot of discussion about on it in terms of policy, and there is a lot of praise coming on from various fronts as well. But I would like to understand, going ahead with the implementation, what roadblocks do you see? Because in India, policy making is one thing, and implementing it is another. So how would you advise the government, if I let's give you that liberty? So yeah.
That would be a huge call.
Okay.
Of course, the government has its eyes, ears open to suggestions, and they had opened it up. So we participated in giving the suggestions, and we participated in the discussions through an online and of course through a lot of workshops that we have conducted, which we will talk about later if possible. But yes, when it comes to India as a country, it's one of the most unique countries in the entire world because of not just the sheer size and population, because of the diversity that we have. And that's our strength. Diversity, not just in terms of the culture, not just in terms of language, but in terms of the food habits, the day-to-day life that each individual has the liberty to live, and a whole lot of other things that stitch up India as an age-old, traditional, strong, fundamental country. And that is what this education policy actually talks about to bring to the fore.
Correct.
So, of course, anything that needs to be changed cannot be pushed through or cannot be forced down the throat. So it has to be in a consultative mode. And I'm happy that there's a lot of consultation that has happened across all the stakeholders for probably almost 1.5 years before even the draft came, and even after the draft came, before it got finalized in July of last year. So that's one good thing in terms of the approach from the government. But as rightly said, there are a lot of challenges because of the sheer size of the country. And I'll give you some statistics. There is more than 500 million population in the age bracket of 5 to 24. This is the demographic dividend that we are talking about. So in the age group of 5 to 24, if 500 million population is in that age group, we also have 250 million school-going students.
Okay.
So look at the sheer number, which would translate into those many number of schools.
Yeah.
Probably we have over 3 lakh schools in India.
Yeah.
And in spite of that, there is still a gap in the supply. And there is some estimate that additional requirement of over 2 lakh schools and 35,000 colleges would be needed going forward.
Okay.
That is the demand, and that is the gap which the national education policy is looking to address.
Okay.
And it's not going to be an easy task, and it's not a button that I switch it on today and it all gets done tomorrow. So there are huge challenges in terms of capacity building in the first place.
Correct.
And when I say capacity building, it's not just the infrastructure, it's not the school infrastructure in terms of the physical infrastructure,
Right.
also the capacity building through the resources. And the most important resources to get national education policy forward are the teachers.
Teachers.
We need to focus on building the ecosystem to support the teachers, to get the teachers to participate,
Right.
get the teachers to be enriched,
Yeah.
enabled, empowered, engaged, so
Correct.
that they are the ones who are the torch bearers, if you look at it.
Yeah.
And not to forget, role of the parents. We've been talking about it.
Yeah.
There is a huge responsibility on the parents as well. So these are some of the challenges that we will have to take it up.
Yeah.
Government alone cannot do it all by themselves. It has
Right.
to be participative. It has to be constructive. And it is on all of us, educators like you and me,
Yeah.
people from all walks of life, parents, students, of course, schools, the management, the administrations, the state government, the central government agencies, and industry have to come together to get this implemented. You're seeing an example of how the vaccination is going on in India, right?
Yeah. It's very, I mean, very slow paced right now.
As of now, slow pace because
Yeah.
there is less participation.
Yes.
If we start participating,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time that we would achieve 100% vaccination in a record time.
Correct. And it's very fascinating that you called us, educators in a way. So, and if I, give one example to our audience, like there's this behavioral scientist, Daniel Pink, who says that, like all of us are in the business of sales because we are trying to move each other one way or another. So, what did you mean by educator when you called us the educators, or who are going to be the educators of the future?
Okay. So it's a broad term that I used intentionally. Because when I say educators, it's not just restricted to the teachers or not just restricted to the school.
Correct.
It is a larger picture that community has to involve. And there is a provision, there is guideline, and there are frameworks in the national education policy for community involvement.
Yeah.
Community in the sense not just from the government side, but in terms of the public participating for sharing of knowledge, for enhancing the knowledge, for providing the right inputs at the right age, so that children get exposed to multiple things from people of competence,
Yeah.
people who have achieved for themselves in life, people who have been in the forefront of changing things in India or even abroad.
Correct.
It could be in science, it could be in technology, it could be in humanities, it could be in arts, it could be in innovation, it could be in culture, it could be a whole lot of gamut of things that needs to come to the fore. We can't be restricting the students to only the curriculum of what is being defined.
Right.
They need to get exposed beyond the textbooks, beyond the school. And that's
Correct.
exactly what national education policy talks about, the holistic development of individuals to
Right.
prepare them for the future.
Correct.
And education is all about preparing us for the future.
Future. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you gave us some numbers in the last question.
Sure.
Would you say that before this education policy, the new education policy, we have been a bit data averse, or are we getting data smart now? Because you are a proponent of data science. So how do you look at the role of data science now?
Okay, very good question, Shubham. It has to be data driven. And if you look at it, the shift has happened probably in the last decade or so.
Okay.
That there is more emphasis on actually collecting, collating, and analyzing the data.
Okay.
To look at what policy changes have to happen, to look at what betterment can be brought about,
Right.
to look at how we can have a competitive edge over other countries.
Correct.
And it's not just about the numbers. It's about what do we do with those numbers.
Yeah.
And that's where data science actually plays a role. And rightly pointed out, the entire decision making, the entire process of consultation, consultative approach, discussions, debates has to be data driven. And that's exactly what has happened with the present National Education Policy 2020. Because there were gaps, and it needs courage to accept that there are gaps and we have missed out on a lot of things, and the intent to address the gap and take India forward is what is driven by data.
Correct.
And why data is important is because it makes our job that much more simpler, that much more easier to look at it from various different aspects, various different perspectives. It could not just be in terms of the demographic dividend of 5 to 24 years, the population number, but it's what do we do with them?
Correct.
What do we have in India? What do we have to adopt from other countries in terms of learnings?
Yeah.
And how do we align with the international trend in terms of research, development, innovation, entrepreneurship, skill development, and a whole lot of other things?
Yeah.
So that's how it should be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing that, new education policy mentions, that India-centric education.
Yes.
So first of all, what is India-centric education? And do you see that this is because of, the Prime Minister's, focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat and largely the privatization of, let's say, education?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Shubham. So if you look at it, over the last decade or so, the pride of India is what we are all getting exposed to, experienced, and being proud of it. And why not? India is probably the only country which had universities structured thousands and thousands of years back.
Yeah, we have the history. Yeah, correct.
We have history, and it is a proven fact. It's no longer just a story. It's a proven fact that we had systems, processes, and structure in place thousands and thousands of years ago, which we have forgotten for various reasons, or probably we didn't pay much attention to it, and probably we lost out in the global race because we diverted our focus away from our fundamentals.
Okay.
And I think this is the time. And if it is not this time, then probably we have lost it out. So I'll just read out the vision of the National Education Policy 2019.
Yes,
and it talks about envisioning an India-centered education system that contributes directly to transforming our nation sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high-quality education to all. Now, education is something as a birthright that we all have. It should be that way.
Yeah.
But getting education to all has been a challenge for decades. We have had multiple programs of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, Rashtriya Shiksha Madhyamik Abhiyan, RMSA, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, and RUSAR, Rashtriya Uchtar Shiksha Abhiyan. All of these have been in place for a long time, and they have shown results, but that's not enough, keeping in mind the gap that gets created on a year-on-year basis.
Right.
So when you talk about India-centered, the thing is, it is to bring about the cultural richness of the country, which has been there for thousands of years.
Correct.
A classic example of India-centered would be to know the good things that have been there for centuries in different states of today.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, the valor, the sacrifice of the state of Punjab is not that much known in the states of South.
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, that doesn't mean there has not been sacrifices and valor and progress in some other state.
Correct.
How many of us actually know the entire picture of India in terms of India as a country, India as a contributor to the Committee of Nations,
Yeah,
India as a participant in global trade and economy for centuries.
yeah,
Isn't it a matter to feel proud about?
absolutely. Yeah,
And that's exactly what needs to be instilled, and that is India centered.
right.
There is no other meaning to it, and I urge everyone whom I interact with to
Correct.
not give any other meaning to it, and
Right,
not to look at it with any colored glasses.
right.
And nothing wrong in bringing out the glorious past of India,
Yeah, absolutely. And
right? So
being
that is India centered education system, and we have
okay.
had a lot of systems in place,
Yeah,
right from our Gurukul Paddhati
yeah,
to the modern day education today. We have had our own systems which have worked wonders and brought about the best inventions in the world much before even the world knew about it.
absolutely.
So that is India centered. Probably the world didn't understand our language at that point in time, which was probably a little difficult to understand, which is
Yeah,
Sanskrit.
yeah,
But of late, if you see, there are a lot of research that has happened on the language of Sanskrit, and
yeah,
that's one of the most structured language in the entire world.
right.
So that is India-centered education system.
Yeah, and
So that is what it is, and of
yeah,
course, sustainably into an equitable, equal for all,
yeah,
and vibrant knowledge society. We are talking about knowledge society. We no longer want to call it educated society. Gone are those days when I want to say that I'm educated. No, education has no meaning unless and until I will not be able to apply the knowledge that I have gained through education.
absolutely, sir.
So that is what the vision of national education policy is, and that is what India centered actually means.
Absolutely. And regarding Atmanirbhar Bharat and privatization of, let's say,
Yes,
education, what would you
absolutely.
say? I mean, is this the same direction?
Well, Atmanirbhar Bharat is again nothing new. We
Yeah,
have always been self-sustained, self-reliant
yeah,
within our own resources.
correct.
But things have changed after globalization, after internalization, after we have opened up,
Yeah,
and we don't have a choice than to be competing with the other countries and be a part of the global system. In the past, we have been, so it's more the reason that we have to be part of it even today.
right.
So globalization is what is driving Atmanirbhar Bharat, if you look at it. Atmanirbhar Bharat is to bring about the nuances, the good things about India,
Right.
either a product or a service,
Service. Yeah.
or the history and culture of India to the fore, and bring it to the global level. So
Okay.
it needs to come from the local to the national and then go to the global level. So
All
I
right.
think it's a good start.
Yeah.
And privatization of education is something that is needed to catapult India to the next level.
Right.
And education is a state subject.
Yeah.
While the center can bring about all these guidelines and policies, it's the state that needs to implement it.
Implement. Yeah.
And every state has its own challenges, every state has its own advantages.
Yeah.
And unless and until the government, the private, and the public, they don't participate together, the
Yeah.
privatization also will not be of that much use, or it will not bring in that much of an advantage on its own.
Correct.
It has to be participative again. So I
Right.
call it the 4 Ps: participative, public-private partnership.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is what it is. So privatization is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong in going about privatizing and getting the private industry to participate in nation building.
Correct.
As long as I have the guidelines and frameworks and the outcomes that are monitored and controlled, it should not be that much of an issue.
Correct. So from 3 Ps, we are now have moved to 4 Ps, like
Yes,
participative PPP model.
absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. And you spoke about conducting programs and workshops at Acumen today. So
Yes.
I would like to ask this question in terms of what is going to be the industrial involvement in education in the future, and Please talk about these workshops. What's the message that you're trying to convey?
Yeah. So it's a very simple thing.
Yeah.
I've been talking about participative participation, constructive participation.
Okay.
So that's where I think we all as individuals,
Right.
as experienced individuals, to whatever extent we have gained experience, it is time to give back to society. We need to engage with the society. We need to engage with the community on a regular basis.
Right.
That's one of the Atmanirbhar Bharat activity or initiative for getting the experienced individuals participate in nation building
Yeah.
through sharing their knowledge, sharing their experiences to the future of India, who are basically the students.
Correct.
And that's exactly what Acumen Today envisages and have been doing. We have conducted over 500 or rather
Wow.
close to 600 workshops
Okay.
in person as well as online. Of course, last year it was all
Yeah.
completely online.
Correct.
So prior to that, we were conducting these workshops across India, covering not just the teachers, not just the students, but also the parents.
Okay.
And that is what Acumen Today believes in providing a platform for
Right.
everybody to participate. And we have not created any digital platform whatsoever. It is only the mindset change that needs to happen. And it happens only when we engage effectively with all of the stakeholders, all of the audiences.
Right.
It's no longer the choice of a parent to outsource education to the school. The
Yeah.
parent has to participate.
Yeah.
There is no longer a time that you would have everything put on the shoulders of the teachers
Right.
to ensure that their children, their own words, learn and not hold the teachers accountable if the children don't score good. It is
Correct.
your responsibility equally.
Yeah.
So that is where I'm talking about. But specifically, when you say industry, we are
Yeah.
all part of the industry. So whether my company, as any MNC or any Indian-based company, whether they participate in education or not, probably you can set aside 1 hour every week,
Yeah.
go to a school to volunteer and provide basic knowledge in terms of science, arts, mathematics, engineering, technology, humanity, storytelling. It could be anything. It's just an engagement that is needed for providing the students a platform to explore by themselves.
Okay. So do you also invite, all these people from, other verticals to deliver those workshops to program?
Yes.
I mean, how does it work?
Yes. So it's a little bit of a heavy lift in terms of coordinating on the time and getting the logistics
Right.
arranged.
Right.
So we had started it prior to the lockdown, and it was pretty successful in getting like-minded people to come and share their thoughts and participate. It's a sense of involvement for that individual is what I realized,
Yeah.
and they look forward to doing such things more and more in the future. Of course, without disturbing their work and their personal life. 1 hour a week should be really good. So many of these industry experienced folks did participate, but it didn't take off because of the lockdown. Now is the time that we will have to revive it. And through your medium, I would want to encourage anybody. You don't have to be part of Acumen Today's network or be involved with Acumen Today in any which way. You can do it all by yourself. Just pick a time of the day, a week, sorry, day
Correct.
of the week,
Hmm.
and pick a location where you have students with whom you can interact. The teachers, the schools, the management will be more than happy to welcome you. This is what our
Your
experience is all
experience.
about.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
yeah, wonderful. And speaking about the higher education, and we hear, a lot of these stories in newspapers, like how unemployable our youth is in terms of, what is being taught to them and the implementation. There is a huge gap. So, how do you see the landscape changing, let's say in 5 years or 10 years?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the intent of the national education policy is to bridge this gap.
Okay.
And as you rightly pointed out, there is a huge gap. I will not go into the statistics. The statistics are abysmally low.
Yeah.
I would not want to get into that. It's a simple thing these days, right? You Google it up and you get the information.
Yeah.
So information is available at a click of a button. But what do you do with that information is what knowledge you will have to apply, and that's where you need to think and apply your knowledge. What's happening, or what has happened in the past, is that there has been overemphasis on scoring high marks.
Yeah.
And scoring high marks actually encourages a lot of rote learning. And rote learning is detrimental when it actually comes to applying what you have learned. Rote learning is good initially in the initial years, in the pre-primary, probably till the first and the second standard.
Yeah.
Beyond that, if it becomes a habit, it becomes detrimental to your growth. It becomes detrimental to your thinking, and it becomes detrimental to your learning. So you start limiting yourself on the learning and progress of it. Children don't know, children don't understand. They just adhere to the instructions given by the elders.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's the responsibility of the elders now, and that's where I say all educators, to ensure that while rote learning is important, it has really worked wonders as a ready reckoner. I'll give you an example of the tables.
Mm-hmm.
The emphasis on by hearting the tables till digit 20 or digit 30 is an advantage that only India has. And of course, now it is being implemented all over the world. But if I restrict myself only to that rote learning beyond a point, it becomes a detrimental factor for the progress.
Correct.
And that is where we need to move away from the rote learning to an inquiry-based learning, project-based learning. And that is where the learning is changing these days. And this is what is needed, and this is what has been explained in the national education policy.
Okay.
So to take that leap forward from not just looking at scoring high marks, but what do I do with what I have learned?
Yeah.
And because of this practice, it has led to the same students going into higher ed and focusing only on how to get the marks and not how to learn and how to apply. Right. That's where the gap is. And that is what the industry is facing a challenge with.
Yeah.
I would have 95 percentile student who would not be able to apply his knowledge, not be able to apply his mind to solve a simple problem.
And because, the picture seems very grim when it comes to, Indian context. But I read your, report where it's, not as bad as India, but the picture is sort of the same in China and America. And people don't know about it. Is it a worldwide phenomenon?
To a large extent, yes.
Okay.
And again, I will not blame it on technology, but I will say technology is the driver.
Okay.
Technology has applied various different science, various different mathematical models, various different interdisciplinary approach in bringing about value, not just in terms of products, not just in terms of services, but in terms of new businesses, new services, and a combination of all of this to solve some of the day-to-day challenges.
Right.
Imagine a point in time wherein I would have to actually be in a physical place for doing an interaction of this kind.
Yeah.
Right. This is just a small example that I'm taking. Many of such examples have been driven by industry wherein they have applied some basic science principles, brought about some humanity principle, and come out with a mathematical model to come out with a product that is needed for me to be effective and productive in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, the use of technology for for transferring money these days
Yeah.
is a classic example of the best digital transformation that has happened of late.
Yeah.
Right. So things like this is actually what the industry is looking at, because the scenario in the industry has also changed.
Yeah.
There is no longer the luxury that the industry has of saying that I have this product which is the best in the market today and I will survive on it for the next 5 years. No. The shelf life of the product, however good your product is, however innovative your product is, has shrunk to less than 2 or less than 1.5 years. Now,
Wow.
what do we do with this? Which means to say that I need to be on the lookout for newer products,
Yeah.
improvisation, and taking the product experience to the next level for the consumers of the world.
Right.
Now, this is where I need to have the skills of analytical thinking, critical thinking, logic, reasoning, and problem solving skills,
Right.
which would first of all identify what the problem is, identify what the challenge is, and then align my thinking around it to solve that particular challenge at hand.
Correct.
So it would go to systems thinking or design thinking and all of it. These are all names that we have given, which are various different methods and principles that we can use.
Right.
But at the foundation of it, it's all about your thought process. It's all about your thinking. It's the ability to look at it, think, and then solve it.
Right.
Fundamentally, this is what is missing across the world. The percentages may vary, the
Yeah.
intensity may
Correct.
vary. But as you rightly said, yes, but more so in India because of the sheer numbers that we talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And that needs to be addressed on a war footing.
absolutely. So, coming back to education system, what would be the new metrics to judge the progress of let's say education of the entire education system in the
Yeah.
future? Yeah.
So it'll all be outcome based.
Outcome. Okay. Numbers again.
No.
No. Okay.
Not necessarily numbers. When I say outcomes, it is quality outcome.
Okay.
In terms of the assessments that we would do would not be on what you remember.
Okay.
The assessments would be in terms of what have you learned and what will you do with this learning.
Okay.
Right? That is basically talking about moving up the chain from lower order thinking skills to higher order thinking skills. So I'll just pick up a quote that is there in the national education policy itself.
Yes, please. Yeah.
It says the culture of assessment must shift from one that primarily tests rote memorization to one that is more formative, promotes learning, and tests higher order skills. And if I were to analyze this, it gets completely aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. Now, Bloom's taxonomy has been there for decades. Now is the time to actually critically look at it and look at how will I implement Bloom's taxonomy from an early age, wherein I will not just rely on the lower order thinking skills.
Right.
And I will mention what they are. Lower order thinking skills is memorizing, remembering, a little bit of understanding, and a little bit of applying. Applying is basically I'm asked a question and I give the answer back.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I need to move ahead of this in terms of analyzing. I need to analyze in terms of asking questions as why is it used? Why does it work the way it works? What does it actually mean? What is the cause of a particular theory?
Yeah.
Or why is that theory a theory in the way it is explained? So you start analyzing everything and anything that is coming to you, which means to say that you put on your thinking hat. You start looking at everything in a very critical manner to bring about that analytical thinking process.
Right.
And bring about the reasoning through a logic. Right?
Yeah.
So when I start doing analysis, I will start also evaluating in terms of my own thought process.
Right.
I will start applying my learning, I will start applying my thinking, and I will bring about the third thing of evaluating whether what I have been taught, what I have learned is actually relevant. What is the effect? What is the impact?
Right.
How does that happen? How might it be better? This is all the evaluation that I would start doing.
Okay.
That would lead to a lot of creativity, innovation, and a huge impetus on creating something new.
Okay.
Right.
Wonderful.
So
Yeah.
if I were to look at moving the entire student community to higher order thinking, it's a Herculean task. I'll have to take it step by step. And that is where we all need to work together in aligning with the implementation of national education policy. And we are working with a lot of educational institutions as partners for implementing the national education policy by bringing about these basic fundamental improvements that are needed, not just in teaching, not just in curriculum, not just in pedagogy, but in terms of assessments as well.
Right.
So this is how the assessments would change, and this will plug the gap that the present youth is facing unemployment about.
Right.
That's because I'm not able to analyze, I'm not able to evaluate, forget about being creative.
Absolutely. So lastly, I would ask you, I mean, does the new education policy miss out on anything? Or let me rephrase it. I mean, is there any place for recalibration of, let's say the targets when there is a particular feedback that comes in? Is it rigid in terms of, policy or, yeah.
Okay. So there are two ways of looking at it.
Okay.
If you, as I rightly pointed out earlier, if I have a colored glass, I will say that this is completely rigid and I don't have any flexibility whatsoever.
Right.
But if you look at it in its holistic sense, it has provided you with the structure wherein you can play around and be innovative in implementing what suits you the best. Ultimately, it is going to be outcome driven, and the outcome has to be in terms of getting the students done away with lower order thinking and get them to a higher order thinking skills. And for that, the implementation has to be through a lot of new ways of delivering the teaching learning interactions.
Correct.
As I said, it could be inquiry based learning, it could be experiential learning, it could be project based learning. For all of this, the changes would happen in the classroom learning.
Right.
The way it is being taught, the pedagogy of it would change going forward. The flipped classroom learning has also been experimented, but not that very successful. We need to start looking at how we implement all of these models that could suit us. And there is a lot of out of school learning that needs to be enabled. So all of this has been mentioned in some way or the other in the policy. What needs is probably a structured approach for bringing all of this in a step-by-step incremental manner. That would help a lot for the implementers. And when I say implementers, it would be the educational institutions.
Okay.
Educational institutions are actually already overburdened with a lot of work that they're doing, whether it is administrative, whether it is managerial, whether it is academic, whether it is assessment, whether it is examination, whether it is classroom management, and a whole lot of other things. If we could help the implementers with simple guidelines, simple templates that they can look at and start implementing, that would be the greatest help that can come out. And who better than the government with the wherewithal that they have.
Wonderful. So, Mr. Atul Bengeri, if you wanted to add anything to this conversation, anything that, we missed out, touching on, so now's the time to do that.
Well, Shubham, I think you have covered the length and breadth of what the education policy would entail.
Yeah.
And your questions were very pointed, while they were generic at the same time. But again, not everything can be covered in this time
Yeah,
duration,
absolutely. Yeah.
as you
Correct.
know. It's
Correct.
a vast subject.
Yeah.
And when we talk about bringing about the change cannot happen overnight.
True.
Rome was not built in a day.
In a day. Correct.
So is the case with the national education policy when we are talking about getting ourselves aligned with the future and for the future of our next generation.
Yeah.
So this can actually go on and on, but I think for the time being, you have covered a lot of ground, and thank you for pointing out on these questions, and I hopefully have made justice to it.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And you took so much time out of your busy schedule. So we'd like to thank you again. And we'd like to thank our viewers as well for sticking with us. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Sure, Sovam, thank you so much, and thanks to all the viewers.
Thank you, sir.